Good afternoon. This is my second opportunity to address all of you. It's funny that I'm listening to counsel's argument about there was a lot of Tyler DeSilva, Jack Snyder in there. This case does not rise and fall with Tyler DeSilva and Jack Snyder. The warrant was signed, you heard from Detective Bango,
on Monday the 16th. There was already enough probable cause to make an arrest. Months later, additional witnesses came forward, and now the defense asks you to disregard them. But credibility isn't about whether you like a witness. It's about whether their account aligns with the evidence. And here it does. Multiple witnesses heard the defendant ask for a knife. The scene was chaotic. There was confusion. There was recklessness. But one rule remains unbroken and undeniable. You do not bring a knife to a fistfight. This case is not about uncertainty over who acted. It is about why it happened and the deliberate choice that changed everything.
On Monday the 16th. So the warrant was signed. There was enough probable cause at that point, and the investigation was still unfolding. But there was enough to arrest the defendant for what he did then. Tyler DeSilva and Jack Snyder approached us 6 months later because they had information. And they want you to discredit everything that Tyler DeSilva and Jack Snyder said. But you have to look at it. Remember when we, during voir dire, I asked all of you, how do you determine credibility? Are you just going to sit there and look and hear, you listen to what they have to say? What's their demeanor? But isn't it, use your common sense? How does what one witness say, how does it marry up to other witnesses' testimony in the entire case? Tyler DeSilva and Jack Snyder are not the only people that heard the defendant ask for the knife that Keenan Frasick did, Demetrius Arfanis did, Mackenzie Trapacati heard somebody asking for a knife while she's walking away. There are other people that heard these things. So again, whether or not you're ready to just discredit them because they have an immunity agreement with the state of Connecticut, I suggest to you, see how the information they provided to you in this case marries up with the rest of the case. And I would agree with the defense that there was a lot of stupidity that night. Absolutely. But the bottom line is you can't bring a knife to a fist fight. You just can't. Look at the defendant's injuries days after the incident. He's not completely beat up. It's because he took the knife out immediately and started stabbing people. You would think he would have huge contusions all over his head, and he didn't even go to the hospital. I would submit if he was that badly beat up and the only way out was I had to fight for my life. But the physical evidence does not show that. And there was testimony, his arms pinned under his body. How did he get the knife out with one hand and open it up with one hand? I would submit that's next to impossible unless you're a pro at it. I think the more likely thing that you can infer from what happened is that he took the knife out of his pocket while he was involved in the fight immediately, opened it up, and started stabbing people. He wasn't on the ground like they would have you believe. He went after Tommy Connor.
Witnesses may not remember every small detail. They may not recall who stood where or the color of a car. But those gaps do not change the facts that matter. We know a car arrived. We know it was confronted, shaken, and struck. We know the people inside were frightened and wanted to leave. And yet, after leaving, the defendant armed himself with a knife and returned. If he were truly afraid, that makes no sense. This was not panic. It was anger. He came back with a plan and a weapon. The physical evidence confirms it. This was not desperation or self-defense. It was a choice.
Stabbed Ryan Hines in the chest. It's just not reasonable to bring a knife to a fist fight. He went there looking for trouble. That's the bottom line. Because if he doesn't go back, none of this happens. But he went back. Imagine if he didn't go back with a knife. It would have just been a fist fight. That's all. But he went back with a weapon. You can't use more force than what's being used against you. And the defense would have you believe that being punched is deadly force. That's simply not true. By the way, they want you to discredit everybody that has testified in this case. This is not a whodunit, and they agree it's not a whodunit, right? He used the defense attorney used that parking lot example. And I was actually thinking about this during the break. You know, the kids that testified, they saw what happened, right? It was chaotic, but they saw what happened. And when they go and they give a statement to the police, you know, were they asked who was to the right of you, who was to the left of you? Probably not. Did they know at the time? Maybe. But now it's 3 years later, right? So it's kind of like a situation where you're in a parking lot and you park your car. Now, all of you came here, you parked your car. Did you look to the right? Did you notice what color the car was next to you? Maybe some of you did. Maybe some of you didn't. But you knew you parked next to a car, right? Now imagine that happening, and then you see somebody being chased in the parking lot and get stabbed with a knife, right? Now that's a horrific event that you've just witnessed. And you give a statement to the police, right? And you say, you're not going to say something like park next to the red car. Maybe you remember that at the time. So now fast forward 3 years later, I guarantee each and every one of you would recall that horrific event happening. But if you got on the stand and I said, well, what color was the car to the right of you? I can't recall. What car was the car to the left of you? I can't recall. Do you know if there were cars next to you? Yeah, I know there were cars next to me. I just don't recall what color. So the reality is the color of the car or the person that was standing next to anybody necessarily in and around that area in this fight, this chaotic scene, is that important in the grand scheme of things, right? Does it make a fact and evidence more or less? Probably not, right? Because listen, there were a lot of people around, a lot of people were watching. There was 2 or 3 kids fighting at any given time, right? We've seen that. We've seen the video. But does it really make a difference if, you know, Taylor Capella told us she was standing next to who? Michaela Holt, right? She remembered her. Maybe there was somebody else next to her. She can't recall. Tommy Connery was standing in the driveway at any given time when the car first arrived. Yeah, I knew I was there. I was talking to people. I just can't remember exactly who I was talking to. But does that really matter in the grand scheme of things when we know the car arrived at 43 Laurel Glen? There was this confrontation. The car was shook. The car was hit, and they took off. And according to people inside the car, it was scary. We didn't want to be there. We wanted to get out of there. And the defendant told you that. Again, assess his credibility, because when he's down the street, he arms himself with a knife and comes back. If you're really that scared, why would you go back and confront 30 kids who just shook the car? I mean, that makes no sense to me. So, I mean, look, the defendant was angry. We don't know why he was angry. It's because of the car. We've heard testimony about that. It's because, you know, these kids really messed up the car and he was pissed off, and it was almost like they one up them. He had already had one up on Ryan Hines back on Lazy Brook because he tuned him up with the helmet after he sucker punched him from behind. But now that they disrespected Jack Snyder's car, let's go back. Let's go back. If things go sideways, guess what? I got a plan B. That was his plan. Might have been a stupid plan, but that's what happened. That's the bottom line. This is not something that happened, you know. I mean, I would say instantaneously. As soon as he gets hit, he takes the knife out. He's not waiting to get pounded on. There's no way. If he was getting pounded on the way the defense suggests he was, he would have more injuries that we would have seen after the fact. And he simply did not.
The defendant claims he dropped the knife while running away. Police searched that night. They searched again the next day. No knife was ever found. Later, witnesses told investigators where the knife came from, information police did not previously have. But even without those witnesses, the core facts remain unchanged. The defendant left the scene, armed himself, and returned. He did not retreat. He re-engaged, and when he came back, he stabbed McGrath in the chest. That is not self-defense. Self-defense is not retaliation. It is not punishment. Afterward, he did not call the police. He did not report an attack. He disposed of the knife and denied being there. That is not fear. That is consciousness of guilt.
And by the way, the defendant testified when he was running out of there after he stabbed McGrath in the chest, he dropped the knife. The cops looked for the knife all in that area. They couldn't find the knife. They actually walked up and down the street. They held the area. They looked for the knife the next day. No knife. And the information that Jack Snyder and Tyler DeSilva gave us, right? We didn't know where the knife came from. We knew the defendant had a knife. We didn't know how he had the knife or where it came from. Jack Snyder gave us that information. He came to us. We didn't go to him. But even if you take the Silva and Snyder out of it, it's still the defendant going back to 43 Laurel Glen with a knife. There were people in his car that he went to high school with that heard him ask for a knife. He went there. He got out of the car. He went in and provoked the fight and instigated the fight. And it started. He took it out and started stabbing kids because that's what he wanted to do. And then once he was able to get out of there, he went back in for more. And they have to have you believe that, he was being approached or surrounded when he came back into the fold. He has a duty to retreat. You can't come back into a fist fight with a knife. It's just not reasonable. It's not reasonable. Even if you believe that self-defense applies to the first 3 kids that are stabbed, even if you believe that, it certainly does not apply to Mr. McGrath. Because again, self-defense is not retaliatory. It's not punitive. It's defensive. You can't do things like this and then turn around and claim self-defense. He came back from the car. Charlie yelled, "He's got a knife." And within seconds, he turned around and stabbed McGrath in the chest. They want to have you believe that he slipped. He slipped. It was a purposeful stab in the chest, right? So again, when we're talking about intent, specific intent, the areas of where the wounds were inflicted, right? The number of wounds inflicted, the defendant's manner and how he conducted himself that night, both at Lazy Brook and later that night. He did not have to go back to that house. It's as simple as that. He did not have to go back. But if he was going back, he was going back with a plan B. That's as simple as that. And that conduct cannot be excused. It's a horrific event. It's terrible. It's a tragedy. That cannot happen. Because if that happens all the time, then this is a very different world we live in. And I asked him on a cross-examination, when you got out of there and you left and you went home, after you texted Mackenzie, you didn't call the cops at that point, did you? Nope. You went to Florida, right? Yep. Did you call the cops when you're in Florida? Nope. After you learned the severity of the situation, did you call the cops and tell them, hey, this is what happened. I was pummeled. I was acting in self-defense. Nope. So again, I would submit to you that, yeah, he knew what he was doing. And as soon as he stabbed those kids, he told Jack, and they got out of there, and they went down to Adams Drive, and he got rid of the knife. Why are we getting rid of the knife? Call the cops. This just happened. It's horrific, but this is what, got rid of the knife, got rid of the evidence. Tells his girlfriend, I wasn't there, didn't want to put anything in writing, God forbid. Because if he said, yeah, you know what, I was really getting pummeled. I had to stab those kids to get out of there. I was really fighting for my life. Didn't say that in the text. Just said, no, I wasn't there. It wasn't me. I don't know what you're talking about. I wasn't there. And then he told Tyler De Silva subsequent to that he messed up. He knew. He knew. The judge is going to give you, the self-defense instruction. And again, it's only justified when a person reasonably believes that such force is necessary. Reasonably believes.
The defendant did not punch. He did not kick. He reached for a knife. The law is clear. You may not use more force than is reasonably necessary. That night, he did. The evidence shows he provoked the fight, became the initial aggressor, and failed to retreat. Self-defense is just that, defensive. It is not retaliatory. It is not punitive, and even if self-defense applied earlier, it does not apply when he returned and stabbed McGrath in the chest. These were not accidental injuries. They were deliberate puncture wounds. Taken together, the testimony and physical evidence prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt.
The first thing he didn't do is he didn't punch back. He didn't kick. Grab that knife. Again, you're going to hear the judge instruct that a person must not use more force than he reasonably believes is necessary. I would submit on that night, he used more force than was reasonably necessary. And I submits that we've proven that beyond a reasonable doubt. We also submit that he provoked the fight. You're going to hear some disqualifiers. If you believe the state has proven the disqualifiers, one or all of them, doesn't matter. if you believe we've proven those disqualifiers beyond a reasonable doubt, that he cannot avail himself of the self-defense claim. So under provocation, you're going to hear the judge instruct that a circumstance under which a person is not justified in using any degree of physical force in self-defense against another person is when he provokes the other person to use physical force against him. The defendant must have specifically intended to provoke another into using physical force and then use force to defend himself from the ensuing force that he provoked that person to use against him. You're also going to hear about the initial aggressor. The instruction that with regards to that is another circumstance under which a person is not justified in using any degree of physical force in self-defense against another is when he is the initial aggressor in the encounter with the other person and does not both withdraw from the encounter and effectively communicate his intent to do so before using physical force. He also has a duty to retreat. You're going to be instructed that two conditions must be met. A complete safe retreat is available to him, and he knows he can avoid the necessity of using deadly physical force by making a complete safe retreat. Self-defense cannot be retaliatory. It must be defensive. It's not punitive. You know, it's again, if you look at if you look at everybody's testimony, they would need you to disbelieve everybody's testimony in this case for you to not find that the state has proven this case beyond a reasonable doubt. If you looked at Jack Snyder and Tyler Silva, took them out of it, and just listened to everybody else who testified, I would submit that there is more than enough evidence to determine that this defendant brought a knife to a house he shouldn't have been at, and he used that knife. He should have. And after he used it, he went back in and he stabbed McGrath for no good reason. But I would submit that he formed the intent to kill him when he turned to him and lunged at him and stabbed him in the chest. You heard the testimony of the doctors, of the medical examiner. These were not slash wounds. These were puncture wounds, purposeful puncture wounds.
The fight lasted about 30 seconds, 17 of those captured on video, even if others were involved. Self-defense does not allow retaliation. You do not respond to fists with a knife. No one else had a weapon. Not Ryan Hines. Not Tommy Connery. Not Jimmy McGrath. This was a fist fight until the defendant escalated. Intent does not require days of planning. It forms in the moment a person chooses to pull a knife. And use it, witnesses saw him turn, lunge, and stab McGrath in the chest. That was not chaos. That was a deliberate act.
You know, the fight lasted about 30 seconds. You heard evidence of that, 17 of which it was video recorded. I know defense counsel wants to point out that McGrath was involved in some of it. Unclear. You're the judges of that. But even if he was, like I said before in my opening remarks, if self-defense cannot be retaliatory, can't come back and say, well, listen, man, you were pushing me into the road. Sorry, I'm going to stab you. You can't do that. I mean, what kind of world do we live in? Yeah, it's not right that there's fist fights. It happens. But, I mean, look, Tyler De Silva was getting beat up, but he wasn't getting completely demolished. I mean, at some point, they threw him out in the street, and they said, get out of here. It was over. And, in the Ryan Hines, Faison Teal, Tommy Conner, they came in and they told you what their part was in the whole situation, right? Tommy Connery, I would submit, there's no self-defense claim against him. He was trying to get in there and breaking things up, pushing him away. Why did he deserve to get stabbed? And I would submit Ryan Hines, yeah. Ryan Hines said, I hit him, punched him a couple times, but that's his fist. It's not a knife. If Ryan Hines had a weapon, it would be a different story. If Faison Teal had a weapon, this would be a different story. If Tommy Connery had a weapon, this would be a different story. And if Jimmy McGrath had a weapon, this would have been a different story. But the bottom line is you can't escalate the fight. And that's exactly what the defendant did. Counsel indicated on his closing argument that Tyler Rich wanted him on the lawn. That's simply not true. And we have evidence of that down at 36 Laurel Glen. They ran down there. They're arguing back and forth. Things are being thrown, but there's no physical altercation. Why would you? Yeah, let's wait and see if they come back. Let's fight on the lawn. I mean, just have the fight down the street. They didn't fight down the street. That's the whole point. They wanted them out of here. Again, the judge is going to instruct you on what specific intent is. And no, there's no time, no particular time necessary, no length of time necessary to form the intent. I know, counsel, did he wake up in the morning? Yeah, I'm going to go kill somebody, stab some kids. Of course not. Of course not. But if that were the case, if we had to prove that somebody woke up in the morning saying, I'm going to go stab people or shoot people or kill people, then we would never be able to prosecute anybody, because that's a tough thing to prove. And that's the point, because it's the conduct at the time that it happens, right? That's how you can infer what his intent was. He created this specific intent when he decided to take out that knife and escalate the fight and stab him. And you heard everybody testify. I think I asked every person that testified that, when you were involved in the fight, did you have a weapon? What did you witness about the fight? Did you see anybody with weapons? Nobody had weapons there. It was a high school fight. A high school fight that the defendant escalated. And the interesting thing is, defense counsel didn't really spend much time on Taylor Capella and Charlie Connery. So those are the two individuals that actually saw the defendant stab McGrath, right? Turn to McGrath and lunge at him.
Memories may fade. Details like who stood next to whom may blur. But no one forgets witnessing violence. Every witness remembered the same horrific event. The defendant returning to a house where he did not belong and stabbing 4 people. This is not about protecting anyone. These witnesses admitted mistakes. They told the truth as they saw it, and consider this. If the defendant was truly afraid, why did he come back? The only answer: he came back armed. This was a fistfight until he escalated it. Self-defense must be defensive, not punitive. He did not have to bring the knife. He chose to. That choice tells you everything about his intent.
Who was Charlie standing next to? Do you think Charlie wasn't, a lot of these kids, they were kids at the time. Their memories maybe have faded a bit. I don't recall exactly where, Ricky Fiola was at any particular time. I don't recall if I was in the basement, on top of the basement, outside the basement. But the story is the same. The horrific event that is etched in their minds forever is the same. They recall this defendant, who had no right to be there, come back to that house and stab 4 of their friends. This is not about protecting people. They got on the stand. Yeah, we were underage drinking. Yeah, there was a fight. People were punching people and it wasn't right. Sure. But who were they protecting? Who were they protecting? They just came in here and told their story from their perspective. And does it mean that because one person's perspective as to where they were standing or who they were standing with, and the other person doesn't remember them standing next to that person, does that mean that it's a lie, as the defense would have you believe? I would submit no. Because if you don't recall sitting next to each other a year from now, but you recall me arguing to you and the defense attorney arguing to you, that's all that matters, right? Because it's what you're perceiving here, not really in your periphery necessarily. You may remember it, but does that matter is the question. Does it matter who was standing next to you at any particular time? And the defense attorney wants you to ask yourself, does a lot of it make sense? And the thing that I would submit to you that doesn't make any sense at all is if you were truly, truly scared of the 10 to 12 to 15 to 20 kids that just rocked the car and threw stuff at the car, if you were panicked, why would you go back and want to confront them? At the end of the day, that makes zero sense. It makes zero sense unless you had some courage in you, and you had some courage in you because you had a weapon. That's the only reason that would make sense. Because he went there, he had the intent to hurt somebody there, especially if the fight got physical. They want you to believe that the knife was the only tool that he could use to survive. I mean, he's not, in the Amazon. This is a high school fight, fist fight. That wouldn't have happened, by the way, if he didn't go back. The only kids seriously injured here were Ryan, Faison, Tommy, and Jimmy. He didn't get seriously injured. You can't bring a weapon to a fist fight. You just can't do it. And to excuse this conduct would be, just wouldn't be right. Self-defense cannot be punitive. It has to be defensive. At the end of the day, that's what this case is about. And that's what they're hanging their hat on. They want you to find self-defense because they can't hide around the fact that the defendant brought a knife to this fight. That's in a nutshell, that's what it is. So you have a tough job, absolutely, because you have to look at every element of the charge. Did the state prove it beyond a reasonable doubt? Did we prove specific intent to cause serious physical injury with a weapon with regards to Hines and Tommy Connery? Did we prove the specific intent to cause physical injury with a weapon for Faison Teal? And did we prove that the defendant had the specific intent to kill Jimmy McGrath and cause his death? I submit to you that if you look at the conduct of the defendant, bringing that knife back, he could have left the knife in the car. He could have not taken the knife from Jack. Think about that. But he didn't do that. He brought the knife with him. If you look at that conduct and you're questioning, well, what was his intent? I mean, you have the Laserbrook fight too. Didn't need to helmet Hines, but he did. He helmeted the kid and then got up there and told you a different story. I think after you look at all the evidence in this case, cold, hard look at the facts, we're confident that you're going to find the defendant guilty of the murder of Jimmy McGrath, assault in the first degree for Ryan Hines, assault in the first degree for Tommy Connery, and assault in the second degree for Faison Teal. Thank you very much for your time.